The streets of Berlin shimmered beneath the soft glow of autumn lamps. The city carried whispers of old history, yet in the heart of Kreuzberg, a modern household struggled with a silence heavier than stone. Anna Muller, a woman in her early 30s, stood by the window of her modest flat. She watched the leaves fall into the narrow street below, yet her mind was far from the present. She had married Lucas, a man of discipline and charm, but her world was now entangled with another presence, her mother-in-law, Greta. Greta was a proud woman of Prussian descent, sharp in her words, sharper in her silence. She did not hide her disdain for Anna. Every sneer carried the weight of judgment. Every glance reminded Anna of her place as an outsider in the Muller family. The household seemed ordinary to the neighbors. The building with its ivy-covered facade looked peaceful, even elegant. But within its walls, tension brewed. Lucas worked long hours at a law firm near Potsdamer Platz, often leaving Anna to face Greta's relentless coldness alone. One evening, while the clock in the corridor struck 7, Greta's voice cut through the quiet. "Nothing is for you here, Anna," she said, her lips curling as if tasting bitterness. "You bring no fortune, no honor, only silence." Anna felt the sting, yet she chose not to reply. Her silence was her only shield, though deep within, something stirred. The words hung in the air like smoke, filling every corner of the flat. Greta turned away with a sense of triumph, unaware that destiny was quietly shifting its course. Outside, Berlin streets bustled with trams and chatter, but inside, the Muller household carried a storm unseen. Greta believed she held the upper hand, her luck towering above Anna's quiet endurance. Yet fate, like the turning of seasons, was preparing to reveal its own truth. The night deepened. Anna returned to the window, her eyes reflecting the faint lights of the city. She remained silent, though her heart whispered promises of change. Shadows stretched across the walls, and with them, the story began to take shape. Morning light filtered through lace curtains, painting patterns on the worn wooden floor. The air in the Muller flat was heavy, as though the walls themselves carried echoes of unspoken words. Greta sat at the breakfast table, her silver hair neatly pinned, her posture rigid. She was a woman who valued tradition above warmth. Lucas entered, fastening his cufflinks, his briefcase already waiting by the door. His routine was flawless, his devotion to work unquestionable. Yet his eyes never lingered on the growing distance between the two women who shared his home. "Do not forget the meeting with Braun," Greta reminded him, her tone calm but commanding. Lucas nodded, kissed his mother on the cheek, and left with little more than a glance at Anna. Anna's silence filled the room. She poured coffee, her hand steady though her heart was not. Greta watched her with narrowed eyes, as if every movement confirmed her belief that Anna was not fit to belong to the family. "Fortune does not come from weak silence," Greta muttered. "It comes from strength, from blood." Anna's lips parted, but she let the words die before they reached the air. Instead, she looked out of the window, where the distant hum of Berlin carried on without pause. She imagined walking away, disappearing into the crowds by Alexanderplatz, where no one would know her name. But the chains of duty and love held her back. That evening, Lucas returned late once more. He found his wife by the window, the city's neon glow painting her face with melancholy light. He asked nothing, offered nothing, and drifted into his study. Greta's presence lingered in every corner, like a shadow too stubborn to fade. Anna stood still, her silence a wall stronger than words. Yet behind her calm, a quiet fire began to grow, one that neither Greta nor Lucas could yet see. The courtyard of the old Berlin building was alive with sounds of daily life. Children played near the fountain, neighbors exchanged greetings in hurried voices, and bicycles rattled against cobblestones. Yet within the Muller flat, an invisible wall stood between its inhabitants. Anna stepped outside that afternoon, carrying a basket of laundry. She breathed in the crisp air, a relief from the suffocating silence indoors. As she pinned clothes to the line, Frau Schneider, an elderly neighbor with kind eyes, approached. "You look pale, Anna," Frau Schneider said gently. Berlin is not an easy city for a young wife, especially with a mother-in-law like Greta. Anna smiled faintly, but said nothing. Her silence was a shield, yet the neighbor's words echoed a truth she could not ignore. Greta's reputation stretched beyond the flat, whispered about in the very courtyard where children laughed. From the upstairs window, Greta watched. Her eyes, sharp as knives, narrowed at the sight of Anna exchanging even the briefest words with another. To Greta, silence was expected, obedience demanded. Any kindness from outsiders was an intrusion into her control. Later that evening, Greta confronted her daughter-in-law. "You must remember, Anna," she hissed. "Everything you touch belongs to this family, to my son. Not to you." Anna lowered her gaze, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She gave no answer, only silence, as though words would cost her dearly. Greta's sneer deepened. She mistook silence for defeat, never suspecting the quiet resilience that grew within. That night, as the city's trams screeched through the dark, Anna lay awake. She could hear Greta's footsteps pacing the hall, heavy with suspicion. The flat seemed alive with whispers, though no one spoke. Anna's heart beat with a new awareness. Every moment of silence was becoming its own kind of power. In the darkness of Berlin, unseen forces shifted. The rift between daughter-in-law and matriarch was no longer hidden. It pulsed like a wound that could not be ignored. Rain swept across Berlin, striking the windows with a restless rhythm. The city glistened beneath street lamps, its pavements shining with reflections of hurried footsteps and umbrellas. Inside the Muller flat, silence pressed harder than the storm outside. Anna lit a small lamp and sat with a book she did not read. Words blurred on the page as her ears caught the faint creak of the floorboards above. Greta's room was directly overhead, and though the older woman was silent, Anna could feel her presence, sharp and watchful. Lucas had returned late again, his footsteps echoing briefly in the corridor before vanishing into his study. He carried the weight of work, of clients and contracts, but never the weight of his wife's unspoken suffering. Greta knew this. She guarded her son fiercely, convinced Anna's silence was weakness, not endurance. That night, Anna rose to fetch water from the kitchen. As she passed the hall, she felt eyes upon her. Greta stood at the end, half shrouded in shadow. "Still awake?" Greta asked softly, her voice lined with suspicion. Anna nodded, but did not speak. She walked past, her steps steady though her heart raced. Greta's gaze lingered long after Anna vanished into the kitchen. The storm outside grew heavier, and with each strike of rain, Anna sensed something shifting within herself. Her silence was no longer empty. It was becoming armor, protecting her against every word Greta hurled, against every sneer she bore. Yet the flat itself seemed to grow darker, as though walls carried secrets neither woman had spoken aloud. In Greta's eyes, silence was submission. In Anna's heart, silence was becoming defiance. And in that quiet war, something unseen was waiting to break. A cold wind swept through Berlin as autumn deepened, scattering golden leaves across the streets. In the Muller flat, change arrived not with words, but with the silent weight of a sealed envelope. The letter came from Munich, bearing the crest of a distant relative. Greta opened it at the table, her eyes scanning every line with hunger. She pressed her lips together before speaking, her tone carrying both pride and warning. "A gathering will take place," she announced. "The Braun family has invited us. It is an honor, though not one lightly given." Lucas looked up from his plate, intrigued. The Brauns have influence in Bavaria. This could mean opportunities. Greta's eyes turned to Anna. "And appearances must be flawless. Remember, silence is not charm. It is emptiness." Anna felt the sting, yet as always, she replied with nothing. Inside, however, the fire grew brighter. She knew the gathering would be more than a simple event. It would be a stage where Greta's power would seek to crush her once more. In the days that followed, preparations filled the flat. Greta oversaw every detail, from clothing to manners, determined that the Muller name would shine in Munich. Lucas moved between work and home without noticing the undercurrent, while Anna remained in her quiet strength. One evening, as she folded garments for the journey, Anna caught her reflection in the mirror. Her silence was no longer weakness. It was a cloak, hiding strength Greta could neither see nor destroy. Outside, Berlin's streets echoed with footsteps of strangers returning home. Inside, the envelope lay upon the table, its message now a promise. A new stage awaited, and with it, the shifting of fate. The journey south to Munich was long, the train carrying them through rolling fields and forests cloaked in autumn mist. Anna sat by the window, her gaze fixed on the passing landscapes. Greta sat upright across from her, her posture as rigid as stone, while Lucas buried himself in documents from the firm. When they arrived, the Braun residence rose before them, a grand house on the outskirts of the city. Its tall windows gleamed with candlelight, and its gardens whispered of wealth and influence. Greta's eyes sparkled with pride. To her, this was the stage where Anna's silence would finally betray her. Inside, guests filled the grand hall with polite laughter and the clink of crystal glasses. Greta moved with confidence, greeting old acquaintances with measured charm. Lucas followed dutifully, shaking hands, speaking of law and business. Anna walked behind, her steps light, her face calm, though every glance from Greta pressed upon her like a weight. During the dinner, the Brauns spoke of prosperity, of families bound by history. Greta's voice rose often, boasting of her son's achievements, of her family's unbroken tradition. When asked about Anna, she gave little more than a dismissive smile. Anna, seated quietly at the end of the table, listened. She spoke no word, yet her silence drew subtle attention. Guests glanced at her with curiosity, some with sympathy. Her quiet presence seemed to carry a gravity Greta did not expect. Later, as music filled the hall, Frau Braun herself approached Anna. She leaned close, her tone warm. "You need not speak much, my dear. Sometimes silence tells the strongest story." Greta's eyes burned from across the room. She had hoped Munich would reveal Anna's weakness. Instead, it revealed something Greta could not control, respect born from quiet strength. That night, as Anna lay awake in the guest room, she realized something had shifted. Her silence was no longer survival alone. It was beginning to shape her fate. The days in Munich passed with endless gatherings. Each night the halls of the Braun residence filled with voices, while the city outside echoed with carriages and music from distant taverns. Greta basked in the glow of old acquaintances, parading Lucas as her pride. Yet beneath the surface, her composure began to crack. For wherever Greta went, Anna's quiet figure followed. She did not seek attention, nor did she beg for kindness. Yet whispers began to form around her. Guests spoke softly of her grace, of the strange strength hidden in her stillness. Greta heard these whispers, and they stung sharper than any insult. One afternoon, while the men discussed business in the library, Greta confronted Anna in the corridor lined with portraits of ancestors. "You are nothing without my son," she hissed. "Remember this. Do not mistake the polite glances of strangers for honor. They see through you as I do." Anna met her eyes for the first time. No words passed her lips, but the silence between them carried more defiance than speech ever could. Greta turned away, unsettled, as though she had glimpsed a shadow she could not name. That evening, during a formal supper, a fragile moment unfolded. Frau Braun asked Anna to join her at the table center. She offered her a seat, a small gesture, but one that shifted the balance of the room. Greta's face stiffened, her fingers tightening around her glass. Lucas, distracted as ever, noticed nothing. But Anna felt the weight of every eye upon her, and for once, she did not shrink from it. Her silence filled the hall like a quiet song, unsettling those who measured worth only in loudness and pride. Greta returned to her chamber that night with her jaw clenched. She had always believed silence meant weakness. Now she began to fear it was something else entirely, something stronger than her own legacy. The final night in Munich arrived with heavy skies. Thunder rolled over the city, rattling windows in their frames. Inside the Braun residence, the last gathering reached its height. Laughter rose above the storm, glasses clinked, and music spilled into every corridor. Yet beneath the merriment, tension coiled like a serpent waiting to strike. Greta moved among the guests with a polished smile, but her eyes followed Anna relentlessly. Each gesture, each silent nod Anna gave, only deepened Greta's unease. Whispers had spread too far now. People admired the quiet woman who seemed untouched by scorn. To Greta, this was betrayal of the highest kind. As the evening waned, Greta seized her chance. In front of a circle of guests, she turned her voice sharp. "Do you know what silence means?" she asked, her tone cutting. "It means there is nothing behind it. No thoughts, no strength, no worth." The words hung in the air, heavy as the storm outside. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to Anna. For a long moment, she remained still. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, her face unreadable. Then, without speaking, she simply lifted her gaze to meet Greta's. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, held the weight of everything she had endured. The silence stretched on, deeper than words could ever reach. One by one, the guests looked away from Greta, their expressions shifting. Some with pity, some with disapproval. In that silence, Greta's power faltered. The storm broke outside, rain crashing against the windows as if the sky itself bore witness. Greta's triumph dissolved into unease, her certainty slipping through her grasp. For the first time, she felt the sting of her own fading fortune. Anna said nothing. She did not need to. Her silence had spoken, louder than any voice in the hall. The morning after the storm, Munich lay washed and quiet. Streets glistened beneath pale light, and the Braun residence, once filled with music and pride, now carried an uneasy calm. Greta rose early, her reflection in the mirror pale and drawn. The night's silence haunted her. She had sought to expose weakness, but instead found herself undone. The glances of the guests still burned in her mind, not of respect but of judgment. At breakfast, Lucas read a letter delivered at dawn. His brow furrowed, his voice flat as he shared the news. "The Brauns have decided to reconsider their partnership with us. They say our family image does not reflect the strength they expected." Greta's spoon clattered against her plate. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. The very fortune she had clung to, the respect she had claimed as hers, was slipping away before her eyes. Across the table, Anna sat in silence, her face calm as ever. She neither gloated nor spoke. She simply existed, her quiet presence filling the room with a weight Greta could not bear. For every sneer she had delivered, every bitter word she had spoken, her luck was now vanishing. Lucas, still blind to the storm beneath his roof, folded the letter and sighed. "Perhaps it is only temporary," he murmured. Yet even he felt the shift, subtle and undeniable. When the family returned to Berlin, the ivy-covered flat no longer seemed the same. Greta walked its corridors with a heaviness she could not shake. Her authority had fractured. Her fortune, once certain, had dissolved like mist over the spree. Anna resumed her quiet place by the window, watching the streets below. She had spoken no words, yet her silence had become the most powerful voice of all. And in that silence, Greta's reign ended, not with a cry, but with the vanishing of all she had believed unshakable.